Okay, happy Capricorn season. Happy winter solstice. Uh, However you want to look at it. Um, Shit. It was cooler and darker today than yesterday. Yesterday it was warm. Yeah, it got up to 70, right? Well, it doesn't look like we're going to get up to 70 today. Matter of fact, this morning it was kind of cold. Um, but do I think it was a natural uh, event that caused the clouds to come in? No, I don't, because I was so congested. And like I said, I have allergies to whatever chemicals that they got going on in these chemtrails. When when the sky is clouded like this unnaturally, I know it's not natural because I have an allergic reaction and my head just swells up. It doesn't matter how many times I blow my nose. It doesn't matter how many times I use, um, Sinead, sinus relief. It's just, an allergic reaction is an allergic reaction. I know there's a lot of other people that are suffering the same thing. I know this. Because if there wasn't, then they wouldn't have all of these medications for sinuses. Even when I'm watching, my shows on YouTube, they have so many contraptions on how to clean your sinuses and actually see what's in your sinuses, you know. And I bet you for those people who are doing those like sinuses washes, right? And they can see, the particles and stuff, in the water. I bet you that some of that stuff is also in these chemtrails that they use to cool down the earth. Now they call themselves cooling down the earth, to save the planet from overheating. All right, this is the whole thing behind all of this, right? Because yesterday we were in the 70s. You can best believe, there was some, cold-blooded, reptiles out there talking about, it's too hot, they can't live in this kind of environment, the power company is going to take all their money because they got to blast the air conditioner, you know. Yeah, anyway, hold on. Okay, so I'm out here, on my our outside therapy, right? Because we're going to defeat, agoraphobia. We're going to defeat it. We're not going that route. No. So yeah. So I was watching these guys that came down from Canada. This couple from the UK. They decided to go to Canada before coming to America. Now, one of the things, that kind of shocked me is how they were saying how cold it was in Seattle, Washington. And I'm like, no, I lived in Seattle, Washington. I grew up in Seattle, Washington. Seattle, Washington can't get that cold because it's part of the Bay, right? It's just, too many, circumstances that won't allow it to get very cold. It stays moderate. It rarely gets under 50 degrees in Washington. Rarely, unless you're in the mountains. right? They do have mountains up there, right? They have a mountain ridge that goes from Washington State all the way down to California. You can see it on the globe, right? And I was wondering how come, they were making it seem like it was so cold. It was so cold, right? Now, there's a jet stream that comes down, from the north, right? And it hits both sides of the mountain, right? Some of that goes back out to the ocean. Other parts of that goes on the other side of the mountain, and it comes into the Midwest. But it's a current. It's an air current, right? But anyway, I couldn't understand why they were saying Seattle was so cold. Because my thought was, first, well, they must be in that mindset of being in Canada, And yes, Seattle is, 2 hours, 3 hours away. But that's like the difference between Dallas and Houston, right? 2 hours, 3 hours is enough to have a temperature change for sure. It doesn't have to be the same temperature. So I couldn't figure out, what was going on until after I did my exercises, right? Because I was like, oh, I'm feeling kind of cold. Let me get up and do my exercises and walk my mile and, get my body temperature up, right? And then after I got my body temperature up, I looked outside, and I was like, well, what's going on out here? What's going on, right? And even though it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? I'm getting out kind of late, forcing myself to get outside, because a part of me definitely wanted to just stay inside. But how could I stay inside? And it's Capricorn season. Yes. Capricorn season. So, I was upset that, they kept trying to say it was a Sagittarius new moon, and it wasn't a Sagittarius new moon. Right? Because it's a Capricorn new moon. And I was upset about that. Been upset about it. All last year, they've been like messing up, the logic, right? And the logic is that's the whole reason why they have the cardinals. The cardinals ignite the different seasons. And it's been like this for as long as, they identified it, right? And even when they didn't identify it, it was still like that. It just wasn't identified. That there are certain days, certain, damn. Oh my God, look at this guy. Oh, look at him. And he's running out in the middle of the street, like we're supposed to be entertained by that. Like, get out the way. Dude, get out the way. So, yeah. It's Capricorn season. I love it. Right? Got me a couple couple of brothers that are Capricorn. They are like night and day. So nobody can tell me that all Capricorns are alike, because they are not. I know some Capricorns, you know, they are the most nurturing, loving, you know, once they get balanced. Once they get balanced, they're the most loving, nurturing, you know, people on the planet. But when they're not balanced, that's right, they're the devil. An unbalanced Capricorn is the devil. Damn, they sold that car quick. They had a green, I don't know what kind of car that was, but it was green. It was right there next to that Bronco, and it's gone. So, anyway, I had to make some adjustments on my survival container, right? Before I got the puppy, I didn't feel like I really needed, you know, to make arrangements for my older dog, right? Because like I said, my older dog is going on 20 years. It's a big dog, and most dogs don't live, you know, this long. I mean, I am just shocked that my dog, you know, is living, thriving, you know, at her age. Okay? So, I didn't make arrangements in the, like, evacuation container for dog food. However, it had dawned on me that, wait a minute, you know, you need to make arrangements if you plan on taking, you know, if you have to evacuate with your pitties, or even if a pitty will survive. So that was one of the things that I did yesterday, was I put some survival dog food in the survival container, right? Because here's what you want, right? You want to have a container that, you know, if you have to evacuate, like say you evacuate and you evacuate with a vehicle. If you evacuate with a vehicle, you could take the whole container, boom, take the whole container, throw it in the back, and, you know, get to stepping. It's already pre-packed, ready to go, right? Now, if you don't have a vehicle, at least you can, you know, take what you need from a place where everything is contained, which you can carry, right? You can take what you need based off of what you can carry, right? And that will save you minutes, you know, that, you know, instead of running around looking for this and looking for that and, you know, going here and going there. that's that's part of the plan that I'm going to do with this container. Now that I have to have dog food in it, it has to be a different container. It has to be a big container. It has to be a dark container, right? And yeah, but we got it, right? We repurposed a container, and it's gonna work out just fine. Just fine. It's gonna work out. Like I said, we don't know what tomorrow's gonna bring, right? We got wars and rumors of wars going on here, right? And some people will say, well, America is not involved. Well, America's involved with something going on in Syria. I mean, you got to have something going on in Syria if you bombing over there. So, and we got something going on with Venezuela. You got to have something going on with Venezuela if you putting sanctions on Venezuela. So it's always good, to try to have the necessities, right? The necessities. And it's not something that you have to just have ready all at once. But if you conscientiously start working on it, little by little, week by week, shopping trip by shopping trip, every time you go on a shopping trip, you start to think about, oh yeah, what would I put into my survival, container, right? And I personally don't recommend those 30-year food products. I just I don't recommend it. I don't believe in it. And I also don't believe in just beans and rice, even though beans and rice is also on the list. It's on the list, but it's not the only thing. Beans and rice and nuts and whatever canned foods, canned meats that you can you can carry. Right? And that pretty much will be it, because I was watching, the Raccoon Cove, shout out to the Raccoon Cove again, that was stating that even though beans and rice is a complete protein, because we need other things like vitamin C, we need omegas, especially omega-3. Omega-3 can work into being omega-6 and 9, but not vice versa. Okay? And it just depends. It just depends on how long you're prepping for. If you're prepping for 2 or 3 months, it's easy. But that's the place to start. The place to start is to have food for a month, then 2 or 3 months, then 6 months, then maybe a year. Right? And the one thing that they had said said was the hardest thing to preserve is fat. They were saying that fat is the hardest thing to preserve because there's so much moisture in fat. Alright? And it made sense to me. It's like, yeah, it takes a long time to break down. And there's a lot of moisture. Yeah. And moisture is definitely, how contaminants grow. I guess they're going to leave this wall up here. I thought this wall was temporary, but it looks like this wall is actually a permanent wall. That's what it looks like. So yeah, we need to think about things like that, when, we're out here, trying to be a prepper. And I'm not really trying to be a prepper, right? But I do want to be somewhat prepared. I think there's a big difference. And like I said, part of the reason why I even want to be somewhat prepared is because, I lived in California for 12 years before coming to Texas. And, they have earthquakes, that's the main thing. And you'd be surprised how bad, an earthquake can be, because, it could flood the area, by the, breaking a water main and flood your apartment. And, it's just a whole bunch of things that an earthquake can do. And when you're driving, you make sure that you have, a survival package in your car. Now, when I came here to Texas, and I've been in Texas for about 30 years now, and longest I've been anywhere is here in Texas. And even when I came here to Dallas, the temperatures kind of reminded me of Seattle, because it does have, the seasons here. It don't have the water, but it does have some bodies of water, which is okay, right? Better than no bodies of water. And they really don't have any mountains. So, they had to engineer, ways to, create these reservoirs and, and Great Lakes and stuff like that. And they have. I've showed some of them to you. I did. I showed some of them to you. lot of it is new construction. And what gets me is these huge houses, right? They have these huge houses, and you just kind of wonder, well, how many occupants do they have in there, right? And because you don't really see like evidence of a bunch of children, you're like, well, damn, they ain't got no children. What do they got living up in there? A bunch of adults. All right. I think today I want to go down this way. We're gonna go down this way just because. Guard. All visitors must check in with guard. Okay, that's the Water Operations Control Center. Dallas Water Utilities. Okay. They have a building called the Filter Building. Okay. So I'm really hoping this isn't one way in and one way out. But I think it is. It says no swimming allowed. This guy's out here fishing here. Okay. I'm wondering if he's actually able to catch some good fish over here. Now I usually go on that side. I don't really come down here too much. I guess because I kind of knew it was one way in and one way out. I probably would come down here more if, you could go out that way. But I don't think you can. It's one way in and one way out. So he got a little pail. And I don't know how, they have some big fish here in this reservoir. I've seen them. Big fish. So I don't think he's planning on catching any big fish. I think all he want to do is catch some small fish. Oh, look at the puppy. And see over there where the swarms of birds are? Those are definitely places where there's schools of fish. So that's an Acura over there. But yeah, so you can see the swarms of fishes. They're right over there. It's because there's swarms of fishes over there. And there might be a few fish over there, but not much. Not enough to call the crowd over. Now y'all know that I have, I was gifted a fishing pole. And at some point, I am going to have to get out here and use it. I'm just going to go over here and see if at one time or another they used to have an exit over here. Even though there's no exit over here now. Okay, they got a boat launch right there. Yeah. But yeah, there's like some Indians from India down here. And they're down here just taking pictures. Sometimes it's nice to have, even if it's just a little deviation. Sometimes it's just nice. Trees. That's what a lot of people like to do on Sunday. Oh, he's out here picking up trash. They don't like to do that. But he lives right here next to this road where a lot of people go by. And I don't know. It seems like people don't want the trash in their cars, so they just throw it out into the environment. Not a trash can. They just throw it out the window. That guy was out there cleaning up, you know, trying to clean up his lawn. And I know that must be frustrating because, you know, where I live, you know, I don't know how in the world I still get litter, in my lawn. Like, how did that happen? How? Let this guy go. Get your ass away from me. But I'm out here cruising. What does that say? What's a gift set? He's out there selling a gift set. What is a gift set? I wonder what a gift set is. Make an offer. Hi, I don't know what a gift set is. It says make an offer. But I ain't got no money to make an offer, so I would just be a nosy. Nosy. There are some romantic people going around, taking a walk out here, and they're like, well, might be their third or fourth date, who knows? Oh, a walking date. Yeah. Hey, he's really stylish, that dude. Really stylish. And his bicycle attire. So yeah, that tree looks like fire. So, I had given my daughter, the offer that was made last year to buy the property, and then this weird ass letter of power of attorney, right? And I gave those copies and stuff to my daughter, in regards to, my interest in the land. And one of them had a map, and of course, I'm trying to explain it in the same way that my mother tried to explain it to me, is, that, she's my beneficiary, and therefore she should be aware, of what's going on, right? because if anything happens to me, then, you know, she'll have to, you know, be in charge of my estate, and that, you know, she will also be the beneficiary to the things that I own. And, you know, a lot of times, all of us feel like, well, if we don't have the money, you know, what good is it if we don't have money, right? And we feel this way, you know, if, you know, we don't, if we're not aware of the affairs when it comes to land, right? And when it comes to land and timber, you know, it just depends on what kind of land. Now, there's land out there that people inherit that is farmland. There's land out there that people inherit that is mining land. And there is land out there that people can inherit that's timber, right? And there are some lands out there that are all the above or any combination, right? There are some land out there that, you know, they might just be great real estate land, right? And I did talk about, you know, that I had, you know, went out, when I had taken my savings out and I was riding around trying to figure out, you know, should I leave Texas, right? And I was looking for someplace where I can buy a small parcel of land for cheap and live there, you know, until I reached, you know, retirement age. Okay. And I told you about that. I was out there hunting, right? New Mexico, Alabama. I didn't do too much in Mississippi, but I did drive around in Mississippi. There was one area in Mississippi that looked really appealing, and that was because they did have like some houseboats and stuff on this piece of water, you know. I went and looked over in Atlanta, and I really didn't like Atlanta because it was just extremely wild. You know, in the most popular hotel, the type of activity that was going on, you know, in that hotel was just, it was just like, what? You know. So that's when, you know, I was like, well, basically, as far as, you know, having all of the seasons and the cost of living and the growth potential, you know, clean water, safety, you know, I guess, you know, to me, Dallas was just right up there. It's just, it's been up there, it's stayed up there, and it's still, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, in my top 5, right? It's in my top 5. You know, there are some other places that I think I might like, but that would require a lot more money, right? There are some places that I think might be, you know, safer if I was of a different race. Okay. And definitely, there's no place that I really see as being, a potential place for me like in Africa. Now, I have been looking at some, videos filming over there in South Africa. Now, South Africa has a lot of Caucasians there, and they also have a lot of black people there. So, however, just recently, President Trump was, inviting, the white people in Africa to come to America, basically giving them asylum because of the type of, death that were happening to white farmers over there in South Africa. So what may have been an option, for an interracial person like myself, which I thought would be South Africa. And I remember when I was even thinking of like Dimongo, and she was in a relationship with, a Caucasian, and, he felt really uncomfortable because he was getting the evil eye from so many black people, and I was like, maybe, the way that they can succeed is if they go to South Africa. It's not going to be in Kenya. Kenya is not, that progressive. Tanzania is not that progressive. Nigeria definitely is not that progressive, right? And even though those countries want to be able to be progressive, they don't recognize that their traditions and their old-fashioned ways are not accepted in the new world, right? And so they'll bring with them these old ways into these new worlds, and then in these new worlds is like, nah, right? Like, all of these Muslims, coming to America and wanting to build, all of these mosques here in America, and America's like, nah, if you wanted to be a Muslim, go back to a Muslim country. This is not a Muslim country, right? So even here in Texas, they've halted, the building of these mosques, right? Which, what I have been saying all along, don't go someplace new and, to get away from, persecution, and then come here just to reestablish, these same traditions that created the whole persecution in the first place, even though you're not sure what created the persecution in the first place. Right? If you're going someplace new, live new, be new. But so many times, people will, like for instance, those Indians and stuff that I have met, right? A lot of them, they have like assigned marriages over there in India, still to this day, traditionally. And even though they have assigned marriages, they don't consider these marriages necessarily the loves of their life, even though they have assigned these marriages to be the continuation of their race. Which is why a lot of Indian men, and I don't know about the women, but I know for a fact a lot of the Indian men will have a wife and have lovers, right? And they figure as long as they've completed their position and obligation to their race, that's all that was needed. Now they're free to do whatever it is that they want to do. Now, I don't know a lot about Hinduism. I don't. And I don't know, actually, to be totally honest, as far as these religions go, to me, I feel like I only know superficially what they are, because most of the people that I dealt with that is of those particular religions, they weren't 100%. And that even includes Christianity, right? The people that I know that call themselves Christians, they cherry pick what they believe in and what they will do and not do, when it comes to Christianity, which means they're not 100%. Look at that pit bull. Ooh, that pit bull was muscular. That must have been like a bully mixture. Yeah. So anyway, like today's Sunday, right? And Sunday is usually a day for rest, communion with other people, supposedly like-minded people. Some people, they go to church. Other people, they're out here, gathering together and, all feeling the same kind of way behind a football game. All right? thing is that now at least we have the knowledge available to us to pick and choose, right? And since we know that all of us have the knowledge to pick and choose, there's no reason to go around here persecuting somebody else unless that person is actually hurting other people, right? Now, when people get to the point where they'll believe that somebody is casting spell work and able to do all of these magical things behind closed doors, then those people have a problem, right? Because they're making up scenarios and saying that this is possible in spirit, even though they know that the spiritual realm is guarded by angels and owned by the creator of all things. That's why I don't even understand how you can even possibly say that that's even possible. But they say it anyway. And there are a lot of people who listen and they just want to believe that whoever it is that they're listening to would not lead them astray. Until it's proven otherwise. And it's like, once it's proven otherwise, they're so hurt that they were taken advantage of, that now they want to retaliate, right? Like, it's just crazy to me. It's just crazy to me. And I guess, what I like about, some Texans here, right? Like the Texans police officer, right? Most of them, you can't pay them to be corrupt. Right? And that's because a lot of them, they are already privileged. So they don't need your money. Right? And they're privileged with education. They're privileged with, unity amongst their race. They're privileged with, loyalty and dedication to one another. It's just one of the reasons why, they're so desired in our society. So I'm watching Raccoon Cove right today, and this one was explaining why you're just wasting your money buying a $2,000 power bank, right? Because a lot of people are buying these power banks because they are more portable, right? But it was stating that it is better, in a crisis, just to have a DIY battery with an inverter and solar panels than, to try to, rely on a power bank. And it was stating that because the tests for these power banks are usually done in ideal situations, not the situation when you need it the most. So a lot of people will buy these power banks thinking that, okay, well, when the time comes, they'll have what they need, right? Only to find out that, not only will they have problems when they need the actual device to work, but because of proprietary parts and patents, the parts are not going to be available, and they won't be able to do their own repairs, and the parts and stuff will cost so much that you'll probably end up just buying another power bank. And I was like, yeah, that seems to be what America does all the time, right? They'll make you buy their stuff, and then they purposely will give it a life, a designed life cycle, right? Because we didn't have parts and shit that broke down in 3 or 4 years like they do now. Right? It wasn't always like this. We used to have parts and stuff that could last decades, right? The vehicles used to be able to last decades, right? But this is not what they're creating today. They are not creating anything that lasts that long, because they wanted to cycle through its life cycle within a few years and force people to keep buying and to keep working at keeping up with, all of the new updates, right? Which is why I never understood, right, why I just went to the Android phone, right? I'm like, no, I'm going to the Android phone. You're not going to have me sitting up here, with an Apple phone, and Apple, is constantly changing their platform, telling me that I got to now upgrade my phone. Otherwise, they're going to kick me out of the Apple Club. Right? So, yeah. Because you would have thought that, if you become a part of the Apple Club, that once you're in. But it's like, no, you not only got to be in, you also have to, pay for the upgrades. And if you don't, you're gonna be asked out. You're gonna be asked out of certain, programs that is only accessible with the latest iPhone. So it was kind of a trip being out here today because the weather is mild, but the clouds are so gray and dark. And thick. It's so thick that you can't really even see where the sun is at. Right? But the sun is illuminating the clouds. On the other side. So yeah. I did like coming out here. I'm very optimistic about Capricorn season and the approaching new year. Yeah. So no school December 22nd to January 5th. Okay, so there's no more school. School's out until next year. Now, I can't say that, upgrading is always a bad thing, because some upgrades that you have to buy is actually newer and better technology. So it isn't like everything new is bad. No, that's not it at all. Damn, this Foster house, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cars of dudes. And they always have their blinds closed. You can't see in. Ain't no telling what the hell they doing to those poor foster kids. But since you don't know, there's nothing you can report, right? The only thing you can hope for is that them kids don't stay in that home for very long. And I think that's kind of where, America went wrong. That America, once they decided to get rid of the orphanages, it was like they either went to boarding schools, juvenile detention, or foster homes. Right? The boarding schools was for the rich people. Right? Um, I guess I'll have to look up the history as to why, they got rid of the orphanages, right? But there was a lot of orphanages, right? We all remember Shirley Temple, who went to many orphanages and did like movies and performances and stuff, as a child. But I did look up that they don't have that many orphanages anymore and that they are utilizing foster homes. But dang, a lot of bad things happen behind closed doors of these homes. And women have been testifying that a lot of bad things are happening behind the closed doors of these homes, and yet, you know, they were all classified as crazy women, right? And even some of the men, who were also saying that they were, raped and exploited, a lot of them, they do get a little bit more sympathy because they have become a protected class in our society. But just because they're a protected class doesn't mean they're actually going to be protected. Because a lot of them feel like, they're on, death row.